Okay, we're live. Hello, everybody. We're live. I mistakenly clicked the button, so we are live a few minutes early. But we only have a few people here tonight, so we're just going to round everybody up. For those of you watching out there on the web, please give us a few minutes, and we'll get started real soon. It's still 4 minutes to 6, so.
From before. Nice on camera, isn't it?
Oh, beautiful. Love the setup. Alright, how's it going?
Yeah, good.
I'm Dave. Alright, good to meet you. Anybody else? No? I think I'm expecting a couple of other people who might be a bit late, so.
Just to relax and
Yeah. So, I have actually just had knee surgery like a week ago. So I'm actually going to sit.
Do you want me to move?
Dude, relax.
Yeah.
So,
I didn't know that.
that's right. I'll take this.
Jeez, right. So was that after your holiday? You were up on the Sunshine Coast?
I was, yeah, for a few days. Yeah.
I was the one who, message.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know that.
A few days up in Noosa.
And then did you have knee surgery after that?
I had surgery, yes, basically the day after Australia Day.
Right.
So straight in. It was just an arthroscopy, so they went in.
Did they sort your thing out? Hopefully.
Yeah, they did. So
Yeah.
I actually just came straight from the surgeon here to do like a post-op review.
Yes. And is it looking good?
I think so. I got to go back in 6 weeks. So we'll know more then.
Yeah. Cool.
Okay. So I'll give it another couple of minutes. I don't know what we look like on the live. Let me just, whoops. So let's just, might zoom in a bit. So it doesn't look, maybe we need to go up.
Yeah.
And yeah, sorry everybody who's having to watch me do this setup over the internet. Once you hit live, you can't get the link back, and I'd already shared it on Twitter. So yeah, but we will be getting started in about 1 minute. So thank you for tuning in. Please excuse me for sitting down. As I was just explaining, I've just had a knee operation a few weeks ago, or a week ago. So let's get into it. Today we are talking about BitcoinSV and what is BitcoinSV? And so BitcoinSV stands for, well, the SV stands for Satoshi's vision. And so this presentation is all about what is Satoshi's vision. So what was Satoshi's original vision for Bitcoin? And why did BitcoinSV have to be created out of Bitcoin Cash? So, 3 months ago it was all about Bitcoin Cash. I was running the Bitcoin Cash meetups. We were having a great time. And now all of a sudden we've split the network. We've had half the people go off chasing sort of anarchist dreams of downfall of government and this kind of thing. And the rest of us standing back and saying, what are they doing? This is not what Bitcoin is about. Bitcoin is about a vision, and it was Satoshi's original vision. So I'm going to go through what that is. The format of the presentation is I have just collected a bunch of quotes from Satoshi Nakamoto, and we're going to go through those and just explore what the broader context of some of those is in terms of Bitcoin. So, starting out with the title of the white paper, and really this defines the base layer of Bitcoin. the base layer of Bitcoin is cash. So it is a cash system. It is designed to be used as money, but it is money upon which we can build all kinds of things. And what's amazing is what we've started to see coming out in the last few weeks since the BitcoinSV network upgraded the op return output to 100 kilobytes. People have just really begun to do all kinds of stuff. I've seen music, images, video, books, stories, all kinds of things being loaded up onto the blockchain. This morning I was playing with a website that is entirely hosted on the blockchain that allows you to post some text to the blockchain using the money button, and then goes back onto the blockchain and retrieves that text and displays it for anyone else looking at the website. So you have this entire thing that just lives on the blockchain, and it's going to be there forever. That's kind of the amazingly cool thing about it is in 20 years' time, I'll still be able to go back and plug in another wish or whatever. You know, the website was Make a Wish. I did plan to have it ready to show everybody, but not right now anyway, maybe after the presentation. So the base layer is cash. What we can build on top of cash is pretty amazing. You know, where we have tokenized, which you know is building some pretty amazing stuff. We have the Unwriter. We have people just building all kinds of things on top of Bitcoin right now, and I'm really looking forward to what they come up with. So, Satoshi's original purpose for Bitcoin was honest money, and really a big part of that is inferred through this quote that he included in the Genesis block. So the Genesis block is the first ever Bitcoin block that was mined, and in the Coinbase transaction of that block, he included a quote from the Times on that day, which was, "Chancellor is on the brink of a second bailout for banks." And you know, what I think this was really lamenting at the time is that the central banks have, I guess, given themselves the right to deflate the value that we all hold in money to bail out their friends and to help the banks. And we really need a system where that power is not there, just doesn't exist at all. And so we'll get into a bit later on that. That's what Bitcoin does. So what is Bitcoin? It is a decentralized, non-trust-based system. So now these are all quotes directly from Satoshi, or from Satoshi's emails or Satoshi's blog posts. So we'll just go through them one at a time. So he says, "A lot of people automatically dismiss e-currency as a lost cause because of all the companies that failed since the 1990s. I hope it's obvious that it was only the centrally controlled nature of those systems that doomed them. I think this is the first time we're trying a decentralized, non-trust-based system." So what do we mean by decentralized? And this is one of the points that I think has become very confused in the Bitcoin and the cryptocurrency landscape. You know, people think that decentralized means millions of copies of the blockchain stored in everybody's houses and basements, and you know, if I can't run a node, it's centralized. It's run by the Chinese, or you know, whatever it is. But that's not what that means at all. Decentralized means that we have a distributed network of nodes spread all around the world, each of which is capable of downloading, validating, and storing every transaction that happens in the whole world in real time. And that's what Bitcoin is. It is a network. And it is a distributed network, and the proof of work is set up in such a way that nodes do not have to trust each other, because proof of work, the nature of proof of work is that it cannot be faked. You cannot supply fake evidence of proof of work. So that's where we don't need trust. We don't need to trust that somebody says, oh yeah, I did the proof of work. You show me, and I know that you did it because it can't be faked. So that is where the non-trust comes from. We trust the maths, we don't trust the nodes. So with e-currency based on a cryptographic proof without the need to trust a third-party middleman, money can be secure and transactions effortless. So in this, he's talking about the nature of a Bitcoin transaction, which is, and again, going back to the title of the white paper, it's a peer-to-peer cash transaction. So when I hand you money, I'm giving you that money directly. Nobody else has a stake in that transaction. It doesn't go through a bank, it doesn't go through a credit card processor. It literally goes from me to you. I pay a very small fee to the mining network, and the miner who wins the right to create the next block takes my fee as a reward for making a note of my transaction on the ledger. Now, a miner is not obliged to write down my transaction. I have to make sure that I pay enough money as a fee for it to be worth their while. And so at the moment, we have a fee rate that's 1 Satoshi per byte. Long term, it's going to become a lot less than that as the value of Bitcoin, as the network itself becomes more valuable, we'll be able to do more with less, if you like. So in the way that we do those transactions, when I give you money, I put a digital signature on those coins. That means that can be taken as incontrovertible evidence that I was the person who controlled that money and that I'm giving it to you. And every Bitcoin has a trail leading back to the block where that Bitcoin was created that has the entire history of that money attached to it. And that's something quite amazing about Bitcoin. And it's something that can't be faked. It's like proof of work. It can't be faked. It's, that is the nature of how this cryptographic proof works. And the transactions really are effortless. So at the end of this presentation, for anyone who hasn't already tried Handcash, I'm going to get you to download Handcash. I'm going to show you how easy it is. It's just super slick, super smooth. I think you're really going to enjoy it. I have so much fun playing with it. And so, we're really starting to get to the point now where the interfaces that we're using with Bitcoin are becoming as good as what we have now with the legacy money system. And we really haven't even scratched the surface. So what we're going to see over the next few years is things becoming far, far easier, and the ease with which Bitcoin moves and with which businesses who build on top of Bitcoin can make their money work for them is really going to change the landscape. So the third quote here I have is, proof of work has the nice property that it can be relayed through untrusted middlemen. We don't have to worry about a chain of custody of communication. It doesn't matter who tells you that the longest chain. The proof of work speaks for itself. And so again, this also comes back to transactions as well with the cryptographic proofs. What it's saying is that you don't need network security when you have proof of work, because there's nothing to fake, there's no information to steal. When everything is on a public network, the only thing that you need to access your private information, your coins, is open internet access. So we're going to move into a situation now where instead of spending millions of dollars on secure networks and things like this, we're going to be taking those millions of dollars and spending them giving people better, more open access to a free internet. And because we're using Bitcoin across that free network, the security isn't relying on software that protects us from man-in-the-middle attacks and passwords and things like that. The security is from the cryptographic model that Satoshi developed with Bitcoin. So next we're going to look at, so Bitcoin must be a singular network with fixed rules. And so this is something that I find myself talking about a lot. So the first quote that I have here is, the nature of Bitcoin is such that once version 0.1 was released, the core design was set in stone for the rest of its lifetime. And this is a really interesting quote, because basically what it's saying is that once you have a money network and the money network is operational, and you have people who've spent money into that network with scripts, you can't change what that's doing. You can't all of a sudden make changes that would remove somebody's access from that money. You also need to consider that this is a financial system, and companies who deal with money don't want something that is fluid, that is constantly changing. They want a network infrastructure that is fixed, that they can build upon. And so one of the things that is a very strong message coming out of the team behind BitcoinSV is that we are going to lock the protocol down, set it in stone, and allow people to build on top of it. And so that's really, I think, where that quote is coming out in the ongoing strategy for BitcoinSV. So Satoshi then went on to say, I don't believe a second compatible implementation of Bitcoin would ever be a good idea. So much of the design depends on all nodes getting exactly identical results in lockstep, that a second implementation would be a menace to the network. Now, this is kind of interesting because we did move away from this model with Bitcoin Cash, and certainly with Bitcoin Core, there are, I think, about 10 or 12 different clients for Bitcoin Core. There were 6 for Bitcoin Cash. There is just 1 for BitcoinSV. There are 2 if you include Bitcoin Unlimited, but I don't actually believe that any of the miners who are mining BitcoinSV have elected to use Bitcoin Unlimited. I think this can also be extended to the network itself, in that there can only be one network. If you have, so currently we have 3 networks competing for SHA-256 hash. We have Bitcoin BTC, we have Bitcoin Cash, and we have BitcoinSV. And it can't remain like this forever. There has to be, you might call it a reckoning, and only one network can survive. So, you know, Thunderdome, 3 go in, 1 comes out. If somebody was getting ready to fork a second version, I would have to air a lot of disclaimers about the risk of using a minority version. This is a design where the majority version wins if there is any disagreement. And that can be pretty ugly for the minority version, and I'd rather not go into it. And I don't have long to, as there's only one version. So if you go back to what a lot of people were saying in November last year, don't fork, you split, we bankrupt you, don't do this, this is not healthy for the network. I think that is plainly evident now, that splitting the network, splitting the value, splitting the developing, the people who are building on top of Bitcoin Cash has been pretty much a disaster. Longer term, I think I'm still very, very optimistic about Bitcoin, and about BitcoinSV. I think the roadmap and the attitude is exactly what it needs to be. So, yeah. So instead of fragmentation, networks share and augment each other's total CPU power. This would solve the problem that if there are multiple networks, they are a danger to each other if the available CPU power gangs up on one. Instead, all networks in the world would share combined CPU power, increasing the total strength. It would make it easier for small networks to get started by tapping into a ready base of miners. So here I think he's talking about mining pools, but I kind of wanted to extend that to the multi-crypto environment that we live in today. So there's something like 4,000 coins on CoinMarketCap today. Many of them run proof of stake systems. There's a lot of them that run proof of work. There's a lot of different proof of work algorithms out there. The thing that people who want to propagate this multi-crypto universe seem to not want to talk about is the fact that every single one of those is a network and has to have a network to be able to manage and process transactions. And without the right incentives to encourage miners to build better and faster nodes, those networks are never going to scale. You know, this is one thing I keep saying. People think I'm a loony, but I say we need to scale from where we are today. You know, we can mine a 100 megabyte block. We've seen it done. We need to scale 1 million times from where we are now. That is 1/1,000,000th of what we need to be able to do to be the global cash network that we want to be.
What do they call it? What's that number called?
That will be a 100 terabyte block. We need the capability to mine a 100 terabyte block. Now that doesn't mean we're going to mine a 100 terabyte block every 2 minutes, but we need the capability to mine a 100 terabyte block to have that robust network that we need. Maybe we're mining 10 terabyte blocks every 10 minutes or something like that. We need to be well ahead of what the demand is to ensure that we can have a reliable performing network. So, coming back to the quote in the Genesis block, so Bitcoin cannot be debased. The root problem with conventional currency is that all the trust that is required to make it work. The central bank must be trusted not to debase the currency, but the history of fiat currency is full of breaches of that trust. Banks must be trusted to hold our money and transfer it electronically, but they lend it out in waves of credit bubbles with barely a fraction in reserve. We have to trust them with our privacy, trust them not to let identity thieves drain our accounts. So this is a very interesting quote, and it says so much about the world we live in today. The fact that you can have your identity stolen by somebody rifling through your letterbox, and they can sell your house out from underneath you, and legally you do not have a leg to stand on, and we see it happen. And you know, it's kind of unbelievable. So in a world where contracts of sale and cash transfers and money is based on cryptographic proof provided from keys that only you control, that sort of thing becomes much harder, because to establish your identity, all you need to show is that you control the money. And by controlling the money, that just means having access to the keys. And so as long as you manage your keys properly, you will always be safe from identity theft. And so there's a lot of exciting developments coming out in terms of key management and identity management. Over the next few years, I think that's going to become something that people begin to trust much more than the legacy systems. You know, you won't be calling up and providing your date of birth and your mother's maiden name and your secret telephone password. You'll be sending 5 cents in a transaction, and that'll be your identity established. So, then about the debasement of the currency. And we're seeing it a lot, with the Federal Reserve in the US, the Reserve Bank here. The money just gets created. The banks have a bit there, but they just lend out more, and somehow they just create it. You pay it back to them, they get to collect the interest. But the money was never there to begin with. It's kind of a mirage of money. It's a very interesting way things are done these days. And with Bitcoin, it's not possible. You can do things with tokens, you can do things in other ways, but at the base, that core cash, that core money system, the supply can never be changed. It's always, we know the inflation rate, we know where it ends, and once we get there, it can never change. So another thing that people get very lost in is the idea that miners will somehow act dishonestly, and they will try to trip each other up, and they will try to increase that supply. They will debase Bitcoin if we don't have our own nodes sitting at home. And what this is contrary to the entire incentive structure of Bitcoin. So the quote says, "We consider the scenario of an attacker trying to generate an alternate chain faster than the honest chain. Even if this is accomplished, it does not throw the system open to arbitrary changes, such as creating value out of thin air or taking money that never belonged to the attacker. Nodes are not going to accept an invalid transaction as payment, and honest nodes will never accept a block containing them. An attacker can only try to change one of his own transactions to take back money he recently spent." So what we're saying here is that if you're a miner, even if you want to act dishonestly, the only thing that you can change in a block is the destination of your own money. So you can pay someone and then do a switcheroo and send that money to somebody else or back to yourself. So they would then see, the thing is that person would then see as soon as the next block is found that, oh, you took my money away. So you've only got 10 minutes to get away with whatever it is you're trying to steal. So really, not only is it exceptionally difficult to do, and I have participated in some offline efforts. There were some guys a few months ago saying, oh, we can double spend on BitcoinSV, so I said, okay, show me, do it. I have a little POS device here. I said, I'll set it up, you double spend it. And they were able to show me transactions that they could see, but my device never detected the double spend. So it was like they tried to come into my shop and buy coffee, and the card just didn't work. No money was stolen. It's just, I just don't see it ever happening. Unless a miner directly controls more than half of the network hashing power, it's impossible for them to get an invalid block into the blockchain. It will always be rejected. Even if a miner controls more than half of the network, there is no incentive for them to change the incentive structure. There is no incentive for them to award themselves more points. There's no incentive for them to throw your transactions away. That's their money. That's their income. So it really does incentivize miners to act in an honest way. So again, in his next quote, he says, with e-currency based on cryptographic proof without the need to trust a third-party middleman, money can be secure and transactions effortless. Oh, actually, I read that one before. Okay, so we'll just jump on to the next page. So Bitcoin is anti-fragile and censorship resistant. Now, the first comment that we have here is, yes, we will not find a solution to political problems in cryptography, but we can win a major battle in the arms race and gain a new territory of freedom for several years. So I look at this and I look at the recently announced MetaNet, and I think about the current situation that we have with data privacy, where to share information on the internet, you essentially have to cede control of that information to somebody who you don't know, who you have signed a very long list of terms and conditions with, and you have to then ask them, please only share my information with this group of people. But it might say in terms and conditions that, well, we can also show your information to this other group of people. And that's how you get our service for free, is you let us sell you to our advertisers. And this has become, I feel like it's a huge situation for people, because all of their information, everything that we have now is digital, and we control almost none of it. With the MetaNet, what you end up with is an entirely new system of data management where your control of your information is as strong as your control of your Bitcoin. So your information is encrypted using the same cryptographic keys that you use, or the same types of cryptographic keys that you use to secure your money. You can share that data very exclusively with people. So I can say, hey, Stephen, look at this photo, and I can share that only with you. Currently, to share that with you, I have to give it to Facebook, and say, hey, Facebook, please share that receipt. Facebook go, oh, yeah, hey, by the way, that's really cool. We're just going to show it to all these other guys. Well, now I can show that just to you, and that's my data. And if someone wants a photograph of, so say that was a photo that was taken in a particular location and somebody wants a photograph from that location, well, I can then monetize that because that's my information. So this is the new internet that's going to emerge over the next 5 to 10 years, I think, where the control of your information is going to become much tighter. You're going to have much more exclusivity over your own data. I'm very excited about that. So the next quote from Satoshi was, governments are good at cutting off the heads of a centrally controlled network like Napster, but pure peer-to-peer networks like Nutella and Tor seem to be holding their own. And so this is where we get into the decentralized nature of Bitcoin. So because the network is so distributed and mining is, we have mining in America, in China, in Africa, in Europe. We have a little bit of it here in Australia. I wish we had more. But at any time, a large percentage of the network can be knocked offline, and Bitcoin will continue to operate. And we had a great example of this in November of last year, when all of a sudden, half of the network decided to stop talking to the other half of the network. So half of the network decided to become Bitcoin Cash, and half of the network decided to become BitcoinSV. And you know what happened? Almost nothing. Both networks just continued to work flawlessly. And to me, that was a fantastic example of just how much you can damage the network and not have any issues. So, I mean, there weren't no issues. Let's be clear, there was a lot of healing to do, a lot of having to reconnect miners to each other. But in terms of people using the network and their transactions, we caused more disruption with our stress tests than we did with the split. So, yeah. So another thing that Satoshi was very clear about is that Bitcoin uses technology to scale. And for a long time now, there have been a lot of arguments, and this is why Bitcoin Cash split off. You had Bitcoin Core saying, oh, we can't go past 1 megabyte. We're going to break the internet. Give me a break, guys. I use megabytes every second on my phone. I can download 100 megabits, streaming video, all this kind of stuff. So Satoshi's quote is, at first most users would run network nodes. So he's talking about the inception of the network. There really were no user wallets. The only way to have Bitcoin, to send or receive Bitcoin, was to run a full node, which at that time was a CPU mining node. But as the network grows beyond a certain point, it would be left more and more to specialists with server farms of specialized hardware. So Satoshi said that and I'm pulling this off the internet, allegedly that quote is from 2008, so before Bitcoin was actually turned on. And that's exactly what we've seen. So mining is now probably one of the most hyper-specialized computing applications in the world. These guys have massive warehouses full of little breadbox-sized computers, and the only thing that they do is hash SHA-256. Those are connected to very, very specialized mining nodes that have extremely fast network connections for propagating transactions and blocks. And as Bitcoin scales, we are only going to see that equipment become more and more specialized. But that's the great thing. Specialization breeds innovation that falls down to us. When you look at things like Formula One, how do you make a car go super fast? Well, there are innovations from Formula One that were developed, 10, 15 years ago that are in our cars that we're driving around on the street today. And so as these miners invest money to research and develop new techniques for moving transactions and moving blocks around the world faster, that technology is going to trickle down into the devices and computers that we use every day. And as everything comes to rely more and more on Bitcoin, we're going to find ourselves more and more connected to the network through that technology. So Satoshi's next quote was, at equilibrium size, many nodes will be server farms with 1 or 2 network nodes that feed the rest of the farm over a LAN. So a LAN is a local area network. Now, that's a very interesting, the first 3 words there, at equilibrium size. What does Satoshi mean about at equilibrium size? And when you think about it, there actually is an upper ceiling on how many mining operations there can be in the world. You cannot have infinite mining operations because there are only a finite number of blocks to be found every month. And so you can't have the income from those mining operations being spread across infinite nodes. You have to have each miner winning blocks to finance their operation. And so that's where the game of Bitcoin mining comes in. As one miner lets their operation stagnate and they get overtaken, they will win less and less blocks. And as they win less and less blocks, they'll have less and less money to invest in keeping up with the rest of the network. And eventually they'll be overtaken. And eventually they won't be able to find any blocks at all and they will have to turn their systems off. But it's okay at that point because they've been completely overtaken by people whose nodes are much faster, they have more hash power, and this all builds into the strength of the network. So this is, you may have heard people talking about the Red Queen. You've got to run faster to stand still. So as the network increases the difficulty to find blocks, you need to hash faster and faster and faster to maintain that 10-minute block discovery rate. And as a miner, you need to improve and improve and improve your infrastructure to keep your position in that hierarchy of miners. As soon as you stop innovating and as soon as you stop working, you lose your place, you lose your income, you lose. So that's one of the things I really love about Bitcoin mining. It's a completely new industry like no other. So the third quote that I have here is, the design supports letting users just be users. The more burden it is to run a node, the fewer nodes there will be. Those few nodes will be big server farms, and the rest will be client nodes that only do transactions and don't generate. I mean, does that make sense to anybody else? Certainly makes sense to me. And it goes completely contrary to the narrative that we hear coming out of Bitcoin Core, that you must run your own node, you must run a Lightning node, you must do this, you must do that. No, you don't have to do anything. You just have to have a wallet that controls your keys. And as long as you have that, you can use the network. You can send money, you can do whatever your wallet allows you to do. And so that's where Satoshi talks about client nodes. So a client node is your mobile wallet. Eventually it's going to become your Facebook app or whatever. I don't think it'll be called Facebook. I think it will be something else, Blockbook or whatever. And it will support whatever capabilities that you have. So already we're starting to see people developing, so we've got Handcash who have announced that they're going to start allowing people to attach rich data to transactions. So I'll be able to send you not just some money, but a photo of where I am. Hey, look, hey, here's that $5 and check it out, I'm at the beach. I think it's gonna, that's just a very light example. Hey, here's that PDF and $5. Can you please do whatever? There's a lot of opportunity there to innovate. So Bitcoin is versatile and private. So the first quote I've got here is, Bitcoin would be convenient for people who don't have a credit card or don't want to use the cards they have, or either don't want their spouse to see whatever it is on the bill, or just don't trust giving their credit card number to porn guys, or are afraid of recurring billing. So Bitcoin, the privacy of Bitcoin is very different to what people think. And because the network does not know who you are when it writes your transactions into the ledger, and every coin that you receive is detached from your identity in the eyes of the network. Once the network is at scale, you have an extreme amount of privacy there. So if you earn money through some private service, it lands in a wallet that you control, even if it lands in your everyday wallet. The key that it lands in, the address that it lands in, is only ever used to receive that coin. When you then spend that coin, somebody would have to know that it was you that received it to be able to track what you're doing. They then have to know who the address that you're sending it to belongs to. They also have to be able to look into that transaction and know which of the addresses in the outputs of that transaction is the service that you're using. And if that service implements their wallet correctly, they would never use the same address twice. So it becomes enormously difficult to track what anybody is doing. As it was put to me the other month, about a month ago, is that it would come back down to old-fashioned detective work. You would have to link a particular transaction to a physical event in the real world to be able to identify who was moving the money. So the next quote I have is that the possibility to be anonymous or pseudonymous relies on you not revealing any identifying information about yourself in connection with the Bitcoin address you use. If you post your Bitcoin address on the web, then you're associating that address and any transaction with it with the name that you posted under. If you post it under a handle that you haven't associated with your real identity, then you're still pseudonymous. So this again goes into that kind of aspect. If you're a busker and you have an address posted on QR code and 100 people send money to that address and someone takes a photo of it, well then you can be associated with that address. But if you're just receiving money pseudonymously on the internet and you're cycling your keys, you never use the same key twice, and nobody knows who you are, it's very difficult to track you. Even using a service like Handcash, they recycle the keys. Unless you would have to hack Handcash to be able to see who someone was, and even then, the way I understand it, they would only be able to see they would only be able to see the keys that you were using at that moment in time. They wouldn't be able to go back through and see the full list. So, one other thing that Satoshi said was, for greater privacy, it's best to use Bitcoin addresses only once. So every coin should come into an address that's only ever been used once, and when it leaves that address should never be used again. And we have so many addresses in the Bitcoin address space that we never need to use the same address more than once. We have enough addresses to last the age of the universe. So Bitcoins are distributed over time. The distribution mechanism sets a time limit on success. Now, I wrote this very quickly, so So as computers get faster and the total computing power applied to creating Bitcoins increases, the difficulty increases proportionally to keep the total new production constant. Thus, it is known in advance how many new Bitcoins will be created every year in the future. So the way in which Bitcoins are created is that every time a block is found, the miner who finds that block wins the right to award themselves what is called a block subsidy. So at the moment, the block subsidy is 12.5 Bitcoins. So every time a block is found, a miner creates 12.5 Bitcoins out of thin air and assigns them to an address that they control. Now, in 1 year actually, that drops by half. So they're going to be able to award themselves 6.25 Bitcoins. And then every 4 years after that, it drops to half again. So in 5 years, it'll drop to 3 1/8 Bitcoins. In 9 years, it'll drop to 1 1/16. And eventually, in about 2140, it goes down to 1 Satoshi and then nothing. And after that, there will be no new Bitcoins. The total number of Bitcoins that is in the network will be fixed from then on. And so it is known in advance how many new Bitcoins are created every year. So we know the inflation rate. We know how many coins there are on the network. There's nothing that can be done to change that. If you try to increase the hash rate, the network will just adjust the difficulty to maintain that 10-minute block time. So, we have a very clear understanding of what the money supply is going to look like for a very long time in the future. So, the next quote is, coins have to get initially distributed somehow, and a constant rate seems like the best formula. So, this is like a proof of work coin versus a token. In a token, you just create the tokens out of thin air at the beginning. You say, okay, we're going to have 100 million Ripple, and we're going to just distribute them to everybody. Bitcoin does it very differently. It distributes the Bitcoin as part of that block reward or part of that block subsidy. And as the network grows and as more effort is used to do the work that goes into every block, the value of the Bitcoins goes up commensurately with that work. This was really one of the big innovations of Bitcoin, is how that supply was managed. So the first half of all of the Bitcoins that will ever be created were distributed in that first 4-year period. And the next half of the remainder was distributed in the 4 years after that. The third half of the remainder, so half of a quarter, so 1/8 of Bitcoins, is currently being distributed in this 4-year period. And then each time we go through the next 4 years, we cut in half the number of Bitcoins that we're going to distribute in that next period. So it's a very fair way of doing it, I feel. So otherwise, we couldn't have a finite limit of 21 million coins, because there would always be a need to have some minimum reward for generating. So here he's talking about transaction fees, usurping the blocks, well, not usurping, that's probably the wrong word to use, but taking over the block reward as the main financial incentive to mine Bitcoin. So in a few decades, when the reward gets too small, the transaction fee will become the main compensation for mining nodes. And this is the important part. I'm sure that in 20 years, there will either be very large transaction volume or no volume at all. So what he's basically saying is, if we do not get to a point within the first 20 years of Bitcoin that the transaction volume that the fees being gathered from processing transactions does not replace and completely overtake the block subsidy, that the network will fail. So the block subsidy will drop so far that miners will no longer be able to afford to run the network. And it's not a 50-50 thing, we almost get there. It's either we get there or we don't. Bitcoin is an exponential system. So we either surpass it by an order of magnitude, or we go under it by an order of magnitude. And if we go under it, that's it. The network will just go dark, and we'll be stuck with what we had before. And that would be very unfortunate. So, Bitcoin is unbounded. So this is something that I find really fascinating. Unbounded means it's kind of like infinite, but it's not infinite. So infinite means you can do things that you can't calculate, but an unbounded system means you can calculate any number. There is no number too big to calculate in Bitcoin. So when you generate a new Bitcoin address, it only takes disk space on your own computer, so 500 bytes. It's like generating a new PGP private key, but less CPU intensive because it's elliptic curve cryptography. So it's interesting how efficient elliptic curve cryptography is, and what a great choice it was for cryptocurrency. The address space is effectively unlimited. It doesn't hurt anyone, so generate all you want. So I think the number of addresses that are in the Bitcoin address space has something like 80 zeros on the end. And when you try to conceive of that number in your head, it kind of just doesn't compute. Like, what's 40 numbers versus 80 numbers? like, it doesn't sound like they're even that much different, but one is 40 numbers times 40 numbers bigger. It's just kind of crazy how many addresses there are. And so you could literally have a computer the size of the Earth, powered by the sun, generating and doing nothing but creating addresses, and it would take like the age of the universe to go through the whole address space. It's incredible. So it does not matter how many addresses you use. They do not take up much space, and there is an almost zero chance that you will ever come across another address that somebody else has used. The next quote is a great one. The existing Visa credit card network processes about 15 million internet purchases per day worldwide. I'll come back to that number. Bitcoin can already scale much larger than that with existing hardware for a fraction of the cost. It never really hits a scale ceiling. If you're interested, I can go over the ways it would cope with extreme size. By Moore's law, we can expect hardware speeds to be 10 times faster in 5 years and 100 times faster in 10. So we're now 10 years since that quote. So our computers are already 100 times faster than what should have been capable of processing the Visa network. So even if Bitcoin grows at crazy adoption rates, I think computer speeds will stay ahead of the number of transactions. So 15 million transactions. I think Visa does a lot more than that now. Maybe,
That's just
yeah.
not what we are.
So maybe
Probably 150 million.
150 million. Okay, so we have already demonstrated 55 million transactions per day on the BitcoinSV network. There's an update coming out very soon that I hope will be able to show even much more than that. And the scaling roadmap is such that, so if we go, say we have 55 million, in May of this year, we'll be scaling to 220 million. And in November of this year, we'll be then scaling up to 880 million transactions. So we're closing in on 1 billion transactions a day. We still need to get a lot further, but we'll be in a place in 2019 where we will easily be able to handle more transactions than the Visa network on BitcoinSV. And it's been my great pleasure to be part of the team that does the stress testing on the network. And I can tell you the results are real, what it can do is real. They're deadly serious about that, and they say it's going to do more than the Visa network. It will do more than the Visa network, and that's going to happen soon. And they've already established the hardware platform that would be needed for terabyte blocks. It can be done with hardware that is available today. This is not foo-foo imaginary stuff that's 10 years away. This is commodity hardware that you can buy now from Dell and places like that to do terabyte blocks. And by the time we get to terabyte blocks, the hardware that we can buy from Dell will be able to do 10 or even 50 times more than that. So it's going to be a very long time before we get to a situation where we cannot handle the volume on the network with commodity computer systems. And by the time we get there, is my fervent hope that the mining income being gathered from Bitcoin transactions is enough that they will be able to basically build entirely new hardware systems that we can't even conceive of today. Photonics, there's a ton of amazing innovation happening in networks. We have single fibers carrying hundreds of terabytes per second. And the miners are going to be using all of these kinds of things to build the network. And I feel like I sound sometimes like a broken record, build the network, but Bitcoin is a network. Bitcoin is infrastructure. It is technological, it is computer systems, it is energy systems, it is connectivity designed to run a global financial system. You can't build it on Raspberry Pis. You can't build it on home ADSL connections. It has to be built for purpose. And so that's what we're going to see. Very exciting. So we're getting to the end of my presentation. Bitcoin is weird. It's very hard to describe to people. If you try to describe Bitcoin to someone who's never heard of it, it's like, so what is it? Oh, it's this cool new internet money thing. Well, how does it work? Well, there's these kind of computers and they're solving this math problem and, So Bitcoin at the surface is not that difficult to understand, and it's applications like Handcash and Centbee that are making these super easy wallets, and that just makes it so easy for people to use. So now when someone says, what's Bitcoin? You can say, well, pull out your phone, download Handcash, ping you a penny, and that's Bitcoin. I just sent you some. Do you like it? So, that's where we're going. That's what it needs to be for most people. And I'm really hoping that it's going to become even more intuitive and more simple over the next few years. But this is Satoshi's words. Sorry to be a wet blanket. Writing a description for this thing for a general audience is bloody hard. There is nothing to relate it to. And he's absolutely right. This is
Satoshi wrote bloody, did he?
Yeah.
That gives you a good idea of who he is.
He certainly used the right vernacular. But I find it fascinating. It's one of the most interesting developments. I think, and I feel like it's more important than the internet. People say that the real innovation wasn't the wheel, it was the axle. The axle that held the wheels together and allowed the cart to roll. And I think that Bitcoin is the axle. The internet is the wheel. Bitcoin is what the internet was built for. And as we move forward, we're going to see Bitcoin really, become more than the internet. If you don't believe it or don't get it, I don't have time to try to convince you. Sorry.
Sounds like someone else.
Yeah, that sounds like someone I think we've all seen before. That's a really great Satoshi quote. We have to move fast. If you want to jump on board, do your own learning. Don't try to hold back. We constantly find people who want to be destructive, want to confuse people. Get out of the way. We need to build this thing. We've got a finite amount of time to make Bitcoin happen, to make it scale, to make it self-sustaining. And if you don't believe us, we don't have the time to convince you. We're building, so sorry. But yeah, most of all, Bitcoin is fun. I love Bitcoin. It's certainly changed my life. And I tell everybody I can about it, whether they want to hear about it or not. It's certainly getting a lot easier with applications like Handcash. So for anyone who's here who hasn't used it, I'd love to give you all a go. But for now, I'm going to turn off the live stream. So thanks everybody for joining us. Actually, maybe I should do we have any questions from the audience before I stop the stream? That was a long time for me just to talk.
It's a pretty good model.
When's the next stress test?
Sorry?
When's the next stress test?
When is the next stress test? Okay, that's a great question, and it's one that I can't really, well, what I can tell you is that I think the nature of how the stress tests happen is going to change. So previously, we kind of, went down the back shed, got a can of gasoline, tipped it out, threw a match on it, and saw what happened. And, it was a bit, sometimes it was pretty bad. We knocked a lot of services offline. We thought it was great fun. We had a very good time doing it. But one of the things that we also proved to ourselves was that there are certain things that the network can't do. And in the last stress test, we completely overwhelmed its capacity. We sent, I think it was 18 million transactions, but only 4 million of those transactions actually got mined. The rest just disappeared. And so what we are, I can tell you now because it's been announced over the last couple of months, myself and the guy who builds the software, mainly Esson, who's over in Brazil, have been working with the team who are developing the scaling testnet. We've been sending, I think we've sent something like 600 million transactions, or I don't actually know how many we've sent, but 600 million transactions have been mined. And so we had a 24-hour period where I think something like 85 or 90% of the blocks were hitting the 64 megabyte block limit. They then did the same at 128 megabytes. It wasn't as successful, but we certainly did get a lot of 128 megabyte blocks. We got 128 megabyte blocks consecutively. They're still figuring things out. You know, that these guys are some of the best engineers that certainly I've ever had the pleasure of talking to and working with, and you know, they're doing great work. So there's a new release of BitcoinSV coming out in I think about a week. It's on the 11th of February. But the plan is not to, I think, we may still do stress tests on the LiveNet, but they're very expensive. And they're getting more expensive as blocks get bigger, because you know we have to pay for these transactions. So what we have been planning to do instead is actually to run the stress tests on the scaling testnet and run them almost constantly. So constantly be making big blocks, and then to invite service providers to point their services at the testnet. And to validate the services in that way. So rather than just saying, hey boys, get ready, you know, we're gonna light a fire and, you know, hope your fire extinguisher is in test and, oh, sorry, you burned your house down. No, we need to take a bit more of a mature approach, and I think this is the right way to go about it. So we're going to invite people into the testnet. They're going to be able to run their applications inside a controlled environment and see how they perform. And from that, I think we will have a much better capability to get people ready without impacting them financially. Because I think that's what we need to acknowledge, is that when we do knock their systems offline and we create extra work for them, and you know, for some people, you know, their services are offline for extended times because, you know, hey, we mined a huge block, but oh, what we didn't realize is that huge block actually completely destroyed the database that they use in the back end of their website, and they had to go and completely rewrite stuff to bring that back online and so forth. You know, in some cases, several days or even weeks, they were offline. So, yeah. We need to acknowledge that that's not the best way to bring people in. And,
Sorry, is that to do with hardware?
That is more of like a software thing, I think. So that's more that, so most of the services currently, or almost all of the services, run what is currently called a full node. So they have a node, it sits on the network, it downloads every single block, and then their service looks into those blocks and pulls out the transactions that it needs for whatever it's doing. And so often what they do is they pull all those transactions into another database, and the issues that arose were most often because those databases couldn't handle a 64 megabyte block as a single piece of data. And so it just basically broke the architecture. And there wasn't any way for them to fix that without going back and rewriting their database to handle data structures that were that big. So it's mostly a software issue. I think what we're going to see moving forward is the nodes that are going to become, and so this was the original roadmap for Terranode, which was the project that was started with Terab. That's now kind of been brought back in-house with Enchain, so Locad, who were doing the work, which is Johannes de Moral's company, elected to stay with Bitcoin Cash. So the Terranode project has now been brought in-house at Enchain. I don't want to say any more than that. I don't really know any more than that. But I think the roadmap for that is that it will be a microservice node. And I think what that means is that for someone building on top of Bitcoin, you'll be able to have a system that prunes everything except exactly what you need for your servers. So instead of, when the blockchain becomes, huge, and it's going to get huge, it's going to, exabytes, zettabytes, brontobytes, all these crazy prefixes that we're going to get to eventually. It's not going to be practical to have 1 million copies. So you're only going to have these mining centers that will have archival nodes that store the entire blockchain. But for everybody else, they'll have a microservice node, and they will simply just request that they be sent transactions that directly relate to what they're doing. And they will store a copy of those transactions, and that will be much less of a burden. And so that's one of the aspects of the original Terranode project, was a microservice architecture. So that's going to help our business a lot, I think, to interface with the blockchain and work on the network without having to suck down every single transaction and every single block. Yes?
I got a question. I heard a lot that SV aims to work with entry price level.
Yes.
So how's that go? What's anything new?
Look, I haven't seen any announcements about agreements with any companies or anything, but certainly that is a very strong focus for BitcoinSV, is selling space on the Bitcoin ledger as a commodity. So, like what I said, if we don't scale, if we don't find ways to generate big blocks soon, the project is going to end. So, one of the ways to do that is to find business models that currently rely on private networks, possibly inefficient data structures that would be much better served by migrating those systems onto a public ledger. And so some of the proposed systems include what's called electronic data interchange, or EDI. So this is a way that big businesses use to send receipts to each other. So if you want to do business with like Walmart or a big company like that in the US, you must have a system that can issue them receipts via EDI. So currently that's all handled like via email or via like a web interface. But the idea would be now that you would simply push, at your end, you would push a receipt onto the blockchain into an address that Walmart gives you. And at the other end, Walmart would just look at the network, they would see that transaction arrive and be able to pull that receipt up. And so you no longer need to have a login to get into Walmart. You just push stuff onto the blockchain and they can see that it's from you. It's still encrypted, so nobody else can see what it is. But they can pull it out, they can decrypt it, and it's a much easier system to manage. Because again, it comes back to, instead of Walmart needing an entire server and internet infrastructure to hold and manage those receipts, now they just need an open internet connection and a thin layer to be able to look up and search the blockchain for those receipts. So that's one idea. At the conference in London, that was in December last year, there was a guy, and this was a really, really interesting thought. There was a guy from a place in Sweden called Unistot, which stands for Universal Source of Truth, and he spoke about salmon farming. And so one of the things that they do now, which I had no idea about, is they actually photograph these salmon from a very young age, and they can then actually perform facial recognition on the salmon. And so they can track these salmon as they grow. They have this technology, so they take photographs, x-rays, all kinds of scans, and so that they can then see. So every few weeks they make the salmon all swim through these pipes, and inside these pipes there's all these imaging systems. They can see if a particular salmon has something wrong with it, has a disease, and then as they swim through the pipe, they just divert the sick salmon into another pen where they deal with these issues. But so what they then do is they can actually track that salmon through the entire logistics process. So as that fish is processed and turned into fillets and sent to the supermarket and sold to consumers or sold to restaurants and served on your plate, you can then have a record of where that salmon was born, what batch of eggs it came from, when it was first scanned. You can have a picture of its face, not that you would probably want to while you're enjoying your salmon dinner. But currently they're doing all of this using SQL, and it's quite a complicated system, and again it requires this very costly end-to-end network infrastructure, and to migrate that sort of system onto a public blockchain where at each step, instead of having to log in and API keys and all this kind of stuff, you literally just push data onto the public internet. And because you control the keys and you control the encryption and you have the ability to, and the ownership of that data, you just need open internet access. You push it onto the blockchain, you pull it off at the other end, and if when you tokenize that properly, you can manage that supply chain in a much more elegant and transparent manner. So that's like another, so there's 1,000 other ways that you can leverage Bitcoin, the Bitcoin blockchain into industry, and it's just finding a few big customers who need 100 megabytes every 10 minutes, something like that, and we'll really start to get the volume, and that's when it'll start to happen. People will see, oh wow, these guys save $100 million a year by moving to this system, we can do that too, and then it'll just be a bit of a stampede, I hope. So, any other questions?
You mentioned something about Dell. What's the involvement there?
With who? Sorry?
Dell computers.
Oh, no involvement. I was just saying that the hardware that you need to do terabyte blocks today is stuff that you can just go onto Dell's website and you can just buy it. Like it's they're not doing anything. Like maybe they're a supplier. I don't know. It's just that's just the example. Like there's nothing special that's needed. It's commodity systems that people use for other things. Can be used today for terabyte blocks. Yes.
What about like custodial solutions for like just people with? I mean, you can't expect people to just hold their private key and keep their data or coins safe. So, where do you think we'd be going in terms of custodial solutions?
That's a great question. So, for anyone watching, it's about custodial systems. I think it's actually going to be banks, and it's going to be that you will establish an account with a bank where you will confirm your identity, you will store your Bitcoins with the bank. They will have, it'll be like a multi-signature thing where if you somehow lose your wallet and lose your keys, they will have the ability to move your coins as well. I think that's a really sensible approach. People aren't ready to hold their entire fortune on a little plastic thing that they keep in their bedroom drawer. You know, I developed a product that helps you store your keys in a kind of distributed manner, but even that, for a lot of people, is not, I don't think, appropriate. So I think it's going to come back down to banks. You know, the thing about Bitcoin is it doesn't remove the need for financial institutions. People are still going to need financial services. People don't want to manage their own money. They want to throw it at somebody else and say, you take care of it. And so the banks that step up to the plate are going to be, you know, the next generation of big banks. And people are going to want loans and financial services, everything that they have today, they're going to want that on Bitcoin. So, you know, there's no reason that the banks are going to cease to it. It's not to destroy banks. It's kind of to change what they do. You know, and I think one of the other things that we'll also see is that when you do store your money in a bank, it will also be insured. So if somehow the bank gets knocked off, or even if you get, you know, someone holds you up at gunpoint and takes your Bitcoins, well, you'll have a means to either, you know, so the thing about Bitcoin is, as soon as that guy moves those coins, we can be ready to be, you know, we can be watching those coins and waiting to see where that action comes from, you know, tracking that transaction, where physically was it located. This is when we come back to this old-fashioned detective work. You're not going to be able to see what every single person in the world is doing, but if you are eyeballing a particular set of coins, it should be relatively easy to see when they move and to kind of maybe triangulate where it is. So if someone stole your coins, you can wait until they move them and then cash them. Well, I would hope that it wasn't stealing. It was more like a legal. Anyway, yeah, that's right. But I mean, if you never get them back, then there would also be the option to have them paid back through an insurance policy as well. So, you know, these are services that are offered today. You can get insurance for this sort of thing today. And so there's no reason that you wouldn't be able to get that same sort of service in the future. I think there will be much less instance of monetary theft. It's a lot harder to steal Bitcoins than it is to steal cash. It's a lot harder to move that money. It's a lot harder to then conceal it once you have moved it. So, because it's all in public, everybody can see what happens to those coins. Like with this exchange, the Canadian exchange, Quadriga, where the CEO allegedly died. I saw today they've confirmed, actually, yes, he did die. But the exchange turned around and told all of their customers, no, you can't have your funds, we don't have the private keys. But the thing is, we can see them moving the Litecoin. The Litecoin has all started to move. So, you know, I don't know what game they're playing, but I don't think it's going to end well for them. So.
I think Independent is here in Australia. They offer insurance.
Yeah.
But they don't have SB. They still this.
Yeah, I believe Independent Reserve is offering insurance from Lloyd's of London on coins held with the exchange. So yeah, this is one of the things that happens all too often is that so when you load your coins onto an exchange, the coins that you see in your wallet are not your coins. What you see is a representation of your coins that is held in an SQL database, but your actual coins are just thrown in a big pot with everybody else's coins. And so when an exchange loses those coins through theft or incompetence or whatever, you will still log in and see, oh no, my coins are there, they're safe. But it's not until you actually try to move them out of the exchange that you may have trouble. So this is one of the things that is an exciting thing that's happening now. So SBI Bank in Japan have been working with N-Chain using some of their patents. They're developing a new exchange architecture where basically it'll be like this bank with the multi-signature. When you log in, the coins that you seek will be your coins, and it will be a shared operation. When you trade, both yourself and SBI will have to sign the transaction to move the coins. And it means that for somebody to steal those coins, they would have to gain access not just to SBI's keys, but to your keys as well. So it just makes it, you know, many, many, many times harder for anybody to, you know, steal those coins. You know, this is a huge problem. You know, it seems like monthly last year there was another exchange, and ever since Mt. Gox, you know, it's been a continual problem in the cryptocurrency industry. Exchanges being hacked, coins being stolen. So the sooner that we can move to this new system, the better, I think. Anybody else? Otherwise, I'm going to cut the feed. Thank you for joining us, everybody out there on the internet. And I will see you in a month. So we're going to run these meetups once a month. Thank you very much. And I will talk to you all real soon.